Hello everyone, bringing a video today talking about this, and we're going to be looking at another example of one of these as well. This is an Indian made monsoon cape or rain cape. And these were issued to British, Indian and other British Empire and Commonwealth forces serving in the Far East during the course of the Second World War. Now this is an earlier khaki example. The other one we're going to look at is in green material. It's made of cotton duck. You can see it closes down the front with a series of buttons. These differ from the Mark 7 ground sheet, or ground sheet cape as it's sometimes referred to, in that it isn't a ground sheet. The Mark 7 ground sheet is really a ground sheet modified to be occasionally worn as a cape, as a rain cape. This is designed from the outset as a rain cape, primarily for use during the monsoon. This particular example, this khaki example, is not complete. It's had various features removed, including the straps inside, which actually allow this to be sort of carried on the back and then pulled around the body when required. So the green example we're going to look at shows more of those internal details, but the khaki example here is nevertheless interesting to look at. As you can see, as I say, it closes down the front with a series of buttons here. In addition to that, lower down, there is also a tab inside here, which would allow this to be buttoned together right down the bottom here, with a corresponding button which is unfortunately missing from the skirts down here. There are also armholes here, so you can see that you've got an armhole there, which when not being used is secured with a small coconut shell button. As you can see, we have another one on the other side, of course. The collar, which is very much worse for wear, this khaki example is not in the best condition. There's one remaining large button here, similar to those you'd find on leather jerkins, and there would have been a corresponding button and a tab here sewn on. You can just see where that would have been sewn onto the collar there, and that would allow this to be buttoned up around the neck, but that's sadly missing. Fold that down there. If I unbutton the front here, take these up, open this up, you can see inside, turn this back a little bit, you have here a double layer of cloth over the shoulders for added waterproofing, and then you have, in this instance, ties, a mix of ties and coconut buttons, coconut shell buttons inside here for attaching a lining, or at least that's what I understand these to be for. So you have these ties down the front here, a set of 3 down the front, and then these coconut shell buttons. There's a more complete set of these internal fittings for attaching a liner in the green example, and we'll have a look at that, although that uses buttons in place of the ties as well as using them up here, higher up the inside of the cape. There's a stamp over here, if I can find it, just inside the collar here, and we'll get a close-up of that now, and that's GMN 1940 something. Unfortunately, it's not entirely clear. And as is typical with these, there's also an inspection stamp down here, lower down, and we can see the date on this of 1944, as you can see here in close-up. Looking at the back of the khaki example here, you can see the seam running down the back, and we have a vent at the bottom here, which is closed with a single coconut shell button, as you can see there. So I can unbutton that here. So that opens up in the rear to give a little bit more movement where required. It can be buttoned together, like that. Not going to turn this fully inside out because, as I say, much of the internal details, the straps and so forth, have been removed. We'll move on now to have a look at the green example, which better shows the details of the internal construction and also the straps used to secure this around the body. So here we have the green version of the cape, and as I say, this one is a lot more complete, and we'll have a look at the various features of this. The external details are basically as per the khaki cape we've already looked at. You can see the button closure down the front here, and then the arm slits at each side. These close with smaller vegetable ivory, I think, or composition buttons, similar to those used on the main closure rather than using the coconut buttons. Another variation to mention here are examples of these made using Newey press studs for both the arm closures and the front closure. That's another variation you see, again Indian made, but using press studs in place of buttons to close both the main opening and the arm holes. Again, we have on the collar here a method of attaching this or fastening this up around the neck, a button here and then a button tab which can be unbuttoned from this side and used to button the collar around like that, as you can see there. Just fold that down again. Now, the main thing I want to talk about here is the internal details. So if we unbutton the front here, there are various details to talk about. One thing we can see here, again, we have a little tab at the bottom there with a coconut button to fasten across there, so you can close the very bottom of this. Otherwise it only closes down to this button here, and that obviously means that the legs are free to move. And if you were stood on sentry and wanted to fasten this together down at the bottom, you could do using that little tab. You also see here down near the bottom we have the stamp here, and we'll get a close-up of that now. You can see a typical Indian inspection stamp and the manufacturer and the date there, which is 1945. We'll open this up now and I'll show you some of the other details I wanted to talk about with this. First off, we have a row of coconut shell buttons down this side here and also down here. There are more of these throughout the interior of the cape, and I understand these are for attaching a liner, though I've never actually seen a liner for the Monsoon cape. These are what I believe these buttons to be for, is what I understand them to be for. You can also see again the double layer of cloth over the shoulders there to add to the waterproofing effect of the cotton duck. If we roll this right back, you can see that the tapes are intact on this. Now the tapes, as you can see, allow you to have this carried down the back essentially, and then very easily pull it around yourself. So you have full freedom of movement with this just draped down over the haversack or whatever you're carrying on your back. And then if it really starts to come down, you can pull it around yourself and button it up. If need be, pop your arms out at the armholes. Of course, the cape is designed to be worn over the equipment, not only the uniform. The tapes in this instance have been looped down around the back. There's a button in the centre and a buttonhole, so where they cross over, they're actually buttoned together. We'll see that in just a minute. And then the ends of these are looped round the waist and buttoned in place here. There's an extra buttonhole there, meaning that this could be adjusted in depending on the waist size. So you have two buttons on one side of the strap, this side here, and then you have various buttonholes here to allow some adjustment in how this fastens around the waist. This is one way of doing it. You could also cross them in front and then loop the rest of the strap around the waist. This is a way I've used and I find particularly comfortable. By buttoning the straps together, you can basically put this on like a rucksack and then just button the remaining length of the straps or the tapes around the waist as we have here. So we'll start moving this around now. We'll have a look at some of the other details. I will eventually turn this all the way inside out, but I'll turn it around and we'll have a look at the back now with this draped down the mannequin, and I'll be able to show you how the straps button together in the rear. So looking at the back here, you can see how this just drapes down the back of the body. If I gather this up and lift it out of the way, you see they're a little twisted, but you can see how the tapes button together in the rear there. There is a, if I can fold this round so you can see, a buttonhole and a small coconut shell button there in the rear where these cross over. And as I say, that very effectively supports the cape on the back of the body like that when you're not wanting to actually wear it. So it's very convenient to carry it in this way and don it quickly if you need to. So I've turned this completely inside out on the mannequin now, and you can see again we have all the way around the shoulders this double layer of cloth. You can see again the buttons in here for attaching a lining, and you have these here around the arm openings as well, as you can see on each side of there, and the same on this side. I believe they're all intact. We may be missing one on this side. I think we are missing one of the coconut buttons there. There are more internal buttons down around the bottom edge here, or well, just up from the bottom edge there, as you can see. So you have those various coconut shell buttons inside, typical Indian manufacture using coconut shell buttons to attach the lining into this if that were being used. You can see the tapes attach up essentially where you'd find an epaulette, up in the collar here, and the same on this side. You can find that there. They come off the shoulders basically. You see this one here has the buttonhole midway down for that button where they crossed over in the back, and then you have the three buttonholes at the bottom there or on the end here, which allow you some adjustment for where this is buttoned around the waist. And the other one, of course, has the corresponding button in the middle there, and then two buttons at the end there, which allow some adjustment with those three buttonholes on the other end of on the other strap. So you've got that method of attaching it to the shoulders there, as we've already seen. Looking at the back of this, you can again see the double layer of cloth over the shoulders here. We have the button up in the collar there for attaching the liner. There's one at the top of the rear vent here, and you can actually see that the vent is open here, but there is a buttonhole there which allows this to be button closed using this composition button here. And we have another of the little coconut shell buttons there again for the liner. So that's the details of the construction there at the rear. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking at this. I guess this kind of forms an adjunct to the beginner's guide video I'm making looking at British kit in the Far East in the latter days of the Second World War. The Monsoon cape is part of that kit, although it's not essential to have from a reenacting point of view, obviously. It's a nice thing to have, a nice thing to have in the collection. Obviously, it's very nice to have both of these in the collection, but it isn't an essential part, and it's not really part of the basic kit you would need. So I've not included it in that series for that reason. But nevertheless, I thought it would be interesting to have a look at. The design was quite effective. As I say, made from cotton duck. It was quite popular. It certainly worked a lot better than the ground sheet cape, the Mark VII ground sheet out in the Far East. It was a better rain cape than obviously the modified ground sheet in terms of actually keeping the rain off, and it has obviously the arm slits and the ability to have it on the back, as I say, a very useful feature when you're not actually needing it. It could be pulled on very, very quickly. The design was persevered with post-war. You actually see examples of these made into the 1960s, British manufacture by that point, but modified slightly, and the design was developed and continued to be made post-war. I'm aware of seeing photos of them actually being used, so I'd be interested to know if anyone has any experience of those post-war examples. I would like to pick one up at some point. They do turn up occasionally. They tend to be relatively expensive for what they are, so it's finding one at the right price, I guess. But that might feature on the channel going forward. Fingers crossed. As I say, I do hope you found it interesting looking at this. If you have and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down below as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.